Let's have a word of prayer. Dear God, thank you for this school. Thank you for the witness that this school has been to others. And thank you for the people that have been sent around the world from this school to bless your name. Please be with us this evening. Help us to learn a little bit about amazing things that you do for us. Amen. All right, well, Danae already gave away the ending. The ending of the story is she doesn't die. But this is a little bit of how we get there. As she said, my name is Olen Netteberg. That's my wife, Danae. We live in Chad, Africa. And this story comes very recently, actually. This story is still a bit of an ongoing story. Has anybody been to Africa? I'm sure people have been to Africa. All right. If I didn't have names on the countries, who could identify Chad on the map? I'm not sure I could have a long time ago. Chad's kind of the big green thing right there in the middle where the arrow is. And where our hospital is down in the southwest corner, kind of right at the tip of that arrow. We've been there for a little over 11 years now. And this is the layout of the hospital around 2006, right before we got there. And this is what it looks like now. And if you look at the very southernmost white building there, that is where most of this story takes place. So you can have a little bit of a visual from it. People ask us what it's like in Chad. So let me paint you a bit of a picture of what Chad is like. Well, Chad is number one in a lot of things. At some point since 2009, Chad has been listed as the country with the shortest lifespan, the worst place to be a woman, the worst place for a child to fall ill, the worst maternal mortality rate, which was approaching 2% when we got there, meaning 2% of all pregnancies will kill the mother. 1 in 50 pregnancies, the mother dies. It's gotten better since then, but that was what it was when we got there. The worst neonatal mortality rate, which is 1 in 8 newborns dies at birth, which is 4 times what the rate was in America in 1950. The worst under 5 mortality rate, which was over 21%, meaning more than 1 in 5 kids died before the age of 5. That's of those that survive childbirth. It's a tough place. The world's hardest country to do business in, the world's worst country for travel and tourism. To have an idea of development, per 100,000 people in America, there's 837 cars, almost 1 car per American person. If you're in Academy here and you don't have a car, don't feel bad. There's less than 1 car per person. You're not out of it. It was also listed as the least happy place on the Happy Planet Index and was also named the most negative country on Earth. I'm giving you a bit of a negative impression of our country, I have a feeling. Also left out was it was named the most corrupt country in the world as well. So this is where we live. This is where we've been for over 11 years. This is where the story takes place. It's really hard to be a woman. We went through some of the medical statistics. For those of you who are in high school, who here is 15? More than 1/3 of you, if you're female, would be married by now if you were in Chad. Teachers, more than 1/3 of your 15-year-old students would be married. 72% are married before they hit age 18. 48% give birth before they're 18. You guys are behind, slackers. Keep it up, keep slacking. It's okay. 6% of girls don't know what HIV is. Haven't heard of it. And only 8% who give birth have a skilled birth attendant. Many of these people who are named skilled birth attendants are illiterate. What gives them their skills is experience, not necessarily formal training. So that's giving you an idea of where we live, what some of the medical care is, and the development and infrastructure of where we are. So this is what my wife read to you, Psalm 122, verses 1 and 2. I lift my eyes toward the mountains. Where will my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. This is kind of a verse that we can come back to over and over again that encourages us in times when things get a little bit hard. So now our story. I get a phone call at 1 o'clock in the morning, which is usually not good when you're a physician and the phone rings at 1 o'clock in the morning. When I saw the caller ID, it was my father-in-law calling, and he says, You need to come over. Mom is on the ground and she's not responding. Perhaps some of you have had a phone call like that before. It's not an encouraging one. It's especially not a good phone call to get when you're in a place that I just described to you, right? There's not a lot of resources that can be provided to a 78-year-old woman who has a few medical issues and is now unconscious on the ground in the middle of the night, a long ways from the nearest airport. To compound that, Danae, my wife who just introduced me, had just left Chad the week before. She's not in the country. She's back with the baby. I'm there with 4 kids and my in-laws, one of whom is now unconscious on the floor. I go over, while I'm walking over, my mind is going through the list of things that always goes through a doctor's head when he's going to see a patient. And I'm also on the phone calling my nurses, because, a doctor can't do much without nurses, right? So I'm calling all of my rock star, crack A-team nurses, and they're all either not picking up or they're busy in the operating room, and I say, that's okay, find somebody to cover for you. I need somebody to come to where my mother-in-law is. I don't know what's going on, but I know I'm going to need an IV. I'm going to need somebody to help. So some people show up. Sure enough, Mom, I've called her Mom since we were married. Mom is on the floor, and Dad can't wake her up. Come on, wake up, wake up, wake up. We're trying to shake her a little bit, to get her to wake up. Nothing. She's having some trouble breathing. It's really sonar. She's like snoring. It's looking very bad. There's really not any encouraging sign to this except for that she is breathing. We at least have that going for us. My nurses are now there. They're looking for IVs. They finally get an IV. We get some fluids in her. We get her back up into bed. We get some oxygen on her. We bring over half of our equipment from the hospital into this little tiny room, the room where this picture is actually taken. And we're trying to get her stable. We've got monitors, we've got suction, we've got a defibrillator, we've got everything that you could need. We don't know what's going on. All I know is that she's sick. We draw some blood, we send it to the lab. We start treating her with everything that we can think of, just kind of off the hip. We give her all the big antibiotics. We start on IV quinine. The tests start to come back. She has a positive malaria test. We're just giving her everything we can think of. She's been complaining for a week of kind of a cough, a sore throat. We're treating her for strep throat. We're treating her for COVID. We're treating her for everything that we can think of. A few hours later, I figure I should do a lumbar puncture. That's when you stick a needle into the base of the spine here to get the same liquid that bathes the brain. The liquid is made in the brain. It kind of circulates around through the back before it gets reabsorbed back in the brain again. That's where this liquid comes from. Who's in the medical field? Got some people in the medical field. I don't know if you've seen a lot of cerebrospinal fluid, but that's not what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like water. That's pus, and that was what was going through her brain. That's meningitis. That's what bacterial meningitis looks like. And that's probably a worse case than you'll ever see in America. Things are looking worse and worse. As a physician, I know that this person has a pretty bad outcome in America. And we're not even in America. We're in Chad. Luckily, by a fluke, by hazard, we had already given her the right antibiotics, not by any great intellectual academic medical skill, just because we were giving her everything. But that's kind of where we were, and I'm writing to my wife. It's now 2, 3 o'clock in the morning in Chad, and it's late evening here in America. And I'm saying, Mom is unresponsive, which isn't the easiest thing for my wife to hear now that she's here with a baby, away from her parents. She's a physician, but she can't help now because she's not even in the country. Soon, within a few hours, all of her siblings are aware. We have a group chat on WhatsApp, and we're talking about what's going on and what we should do, and we don't know. All we know is that we should pray. And word starts to get out. The story starts to spread of, this couple, this missionary couple. They had come to Chad for 6 years, At age 69, they signed up to come spend 5 years in Chad, Africa as missionaries. Not many people would do that. They ended up staying for 6 years until they were 75 before they went back to America. We were in a bind. We had a backlog of almost 200 patients who were waiting for surgery, and we needed help. They came to help us so that my father-in-law could help operate, my mother-in-law could help take care of the kids so we could go take care of patients. They came to help, and this happened while they were helping. What's going on? That's not how this is supposed to work, right? I mean, you don't sign up for this, do you? So everybody is stressed now. But everybody chips in. People spring into action. People there in Chad. Andrew is one of my colleague physicians. He's a surgeon, but he kind of took over her care as the ICU doc. He's doing all the ICU things. He's making sure that she's getting fed, she's getting IV fluids. We're checking how much urine she's making and how much is going into her. And he brings in a team, our maintenance guys and all the team to kind of lift up the end of the bed. And we put sawhorses under the head of the bed so that it comes up so she's at less risk of vomiting and then breathing that vomit into her lungs. He's making sure that her stomach is protected, that we even get her so that she's not going to get a blood clot. Megan is another doctor there. Megan starts mixing up smoothies to give through her nasogastric tube. By now we have a tube in her nose going to her stomach so we can give her food and calories so she can recover. She's putting tahini in a fruit smoothie, which tastes awful, but it doesn't matter because it's going in her nose directly to her stomach. She doesn't have to taste it. But she's trying to find all the healthiest things that we can get there to put into this smoothie. Marcella is from the Dominican Republic. She's there with us as a physical therapist. She's trying to move this comatose woman to make sure that she can keep her muscle tone and can stay flexible. Sonam is from Oregon. Pavel is from Poland. Rebecca is from Cameroon. They're with us there in Chad. They're my nurses that are with my mother-in-law 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're there with her all the time, nonstop, making sure that she gets the best care, that she's monitored. I still have 4 kids there. They're kind of free-range organic children now roaming around without a parent because I'm with my mother-in-law. Somebody is taking care of them. I hope somebody is feeding them. We have people that are doing that. The doctors are now dedicating time to my mother-in-law. So we need other people to go help out of the hospital. People are taking care of the hospital work. Jonathan is a missionary who's a couple miles down the road. He comes up to be kind of our chaplain, to pray, and we're singing hymns, and actually at one point we even have an anointing. And you don't typically do an anointing when you're expecting somebody to survive. And then the word gets out on Facebook, and it just spreads. And I have a group of, I'm an emergency physician. There's a Facebook group of about 23,000 emergency physicians. And so I write to them and I say, hey, they're not necessarily Adventist. Mostly they're not even Christian. The only thing they have in common is not a belief system. It's that they're emergency physicians. But I say, pray if you're willing to pray. And give me medical advice if you have any medical advice. 1,500 of them right back say they're praying. There are more. There are so many more around the globe. I think by the end we had just about somebody in every time zone around the world, just about. And people were praying for her recovery. And for days, she doesn't wake up. She lays in bed. She breathes. I have a video, but I think I took it out, where you could hear her breathing. She was not breathing very well, but she is breathing. Sometimes when her breathing gets rough, we have to grab what's called a bag valve mask, where you put this mask on the patient's face and you squeeze a bag to breathe for them, because she wasn't breathing adequately. Despite the oxygen, her oxygen was dropping, and she would not last long without some intervention. It was a really rough time, and she looked like she wasn't going to make it. And we were talking about, what do we do if she dies here in Chad? how do we get her the best care possible? We had talked about getting a plane to take her out of the country. Well, traveling by an airplane is stressful for a body. I don't know if you've traveled halfway around the world on an airplane, but maybe you've noticed it's a little stressful on your body. And when you're already sick, that actually poses a very real danger to your survival. And we felt like she wouldn't survive a trip at that point, that we really needed to keep her in this guest room in a part of Chad, Africa, that's 25 miles from the nearest pavement, in a region of 1 million people where there is no electrical power grid, where there is no running water, where there is no development, but we still felt that was the best thing for her at that time. Eventually, whether it was real or whether it was just by hoping, we could say things like, raise your hand, and she would raise her hand. It's hard to say if that's just her being stimulated by a voice and reacting, but she did it a couple times in a row before she stopped, and we felt like that was a good sign. She would start to open her eyes and look around. She would start to smile, not necessarily at anything, but something in her brain was firing, and that was a good sign. It was almost like her lips would move like she was trying to say words, but nothing intelligible would come out. But it looked like she was getting better. This was actually her room. In the picture on the left, you can see that's her arm. At one point, she had multiple IVs in her arms and in her feet. It was hard to get an IV, so wherever we got it, we would get it. You can see her IV fluids are going in. There's a suction machine on the floor, an oxygen concentrator on the floor. Our monitor is there, a couple IV poles on that table in the back is where all of our supplies were set up. We were prepared to intubate her if she needed it now. After COVID, I think everybody knows what intubation is. Those are the sawhorses that we put under her bed just to get the head of her bed up a little bit. This is the team. That's my father-in-law there. He didn't sleep. He slept on that couch right there for days, not allowing himself to go lay down on a proper bed. That's my Polish nurse who had also been awake with him for a long time. It was a hard time, but we knew there was such incredible support around the world. There were phone calls flying back and forth from here to America, from here to just everywhere. There were prayers going on and off. There was this constant question of, should we try to do a medical evacuation? Should we try to get a plane to get her out or not? There was more prayers, more of wondering where your help is going to come from. Oh yeah, and we still had kids. Our kids were trying to entertain themselves, running around. Homeschooling had kind of gone out the window for a few days while we were attending to their nana. What they took to making this little spot of the garden their hospital. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture from later on, but later on they had developed the whole place into a complex set of cardboard medical machines that they had invented out of their heads, and a whole hospital they made where they were pulling bullets out of people and treating stab victims and doing surgery on each other. And I didn't even want to know, but I saw some knives there at one point. I said, put those back in the kitchen. Here they're giving an IV shot to my daughter, who is apparently sick with, I don't know what she's sick with, but sick with something. The phone calls continue. We decide, okay, we think she's a little bit better now. We think she can survive a flight to America. So we're calling around to find a plane. Loma Linda had a donor to their recent project, and the president of Loma Linda called this donor and said, hey, can we borrow your plane? He said, yeah, what for? We need to fly it to Nowheresville, Africa, to fly a patient back who's sick with bacterial meningitis. He said, yeah, okay, sure. Apparently people can do that. So where's your plane? Well, it's in Vegas. Okay, well, are your pilots available? Yeah, of course, they're always available. So let's call them. Well, his plane is in the shop. Oh, man. Okay, well, We'll have to go down to plan B and C and D. He said, oh wait, let me check about my other plane. Apparently, some people have multiple planes. The other plane also couldn't fly. So we're going back and forth. Danae and her siblings in America are calling, I don't know, a half a dozen probably medical evacuation companies. We're looking into flying to South Africa, flying to Kenya, to fly anywhere. I mean, you saw what our medical statistics are like in Chad. They're not great. Anywhere is going to be better. Where can we go? So eventually we have a friend who's the medical director of a hospital in France. He does cancer surgeries. This definitely is not in his wheelhouse, but he said, yeah, I can pull some strings. Let's bring her here. I can get an ICU bed here. Let's bring her here. We'll get her stabilized and then get her onto America. We're like, great. So now we call our friend Gary, who's an amazing missionary pilot, and he's in Indonesia normally. He happens to be an American. He's like, well, I just bought and serviced a plane for the mission field that can make the trip across the Atlantic. Kinda. Well, I don't really want a plane that kinda makes it across an ocean. What do you mean, Gary? He's like, well, we can fly it down to the Caribbean to Brazil. And then from Brazil to Africa, it's kind of a little bit closer right there, and I'm pretty sure we can make it across. I know Gary, and that's kind of the way Gary works. And if Gary's pretty sure, that means it'll make it. So we're like, okay, well, I mean, what's the cost? Well, the cost is significant, but it's not, we'll find a way, right? And Gary has some missionary friends that are like, we can make sure that cost isn't an issue. We can make sure that the fuel is paid for and that this happens. So we're like, okay. And Gary says, we can do this. I'm not going to say, no, you tell me to do that and I'll do it. It's probably not your best option, though. I was like, okay, well, let's keep looking. So Gary says, well, I have a buddy. And Gary's got buddies everywhere. He's like, I've got a buddy who runs a medevac company in Canada. I was like, all right, we'll call them. And he's like, okay, they'll give you the friends and family rate. Apparently you can get a friends and family rate for a medical evacuation. So we get the friends and family rate, which is a cool $120,000. That's a lot of first-class tickets. But what is a life worth when it's your family? So we say, okay, Gary, let's do this. We'll find a way to pay that bill. So we start the process. And we get this company, and they're on their way. They're like, all right, we're sending a jet from Canada. They've got to make a few stops for fuel. They'll be there. You need to get up to the capital. So we say, okay. And we've learned now to start making lots of backup plans. So we don't stop making the backup plans. We call the embassy. We call folks at the State Department. We make sure everybody's aware. We have backup plans to our backup plans. But now it looks like everything is coming together. We have a time. The plane is arriving at 4 p.m. in the capital. We just need to get there. It's a 12-hour drive in the back of a Land Cruiser, which isn't going to be fun with a comatose patient. Well, there's another mission pilot up in the capital of the country who agrees to fly down a Cessna Caravan. So he's going to come down and pick us up for the flight up to N'Djamena. Oh yeah, and it is January 24. The significance of January 24 is it's my wife's birthday. So we're loading up Dolores into the Land Cruiser to take her 2 kilometers down to the airport so that I can deliver this is my birthday present to my wife, right? I'm not in America, I didn't get you anything. Here's your mom. So here we're carrying her to the plane, and this is the plane taking off to take my mother-in-law up to the capital. You can see it's a dirt strip. It was the most exciting thing to happen there that month, and the whole village came out to say goodbye. Some of them because they were grateful of the 6 years of service they had spent in Chad. Most of them just because it's really cool when a plane lands in a village that never sees a plane. This is my nurses Pavel and Sonam in the plane, taking care of my mother-in-law on the way up to the Capitol. So we're finally on the plane that's going to get Mom home. I can finally deliver my mother-in-law into the hands of a Canadian emergency physician who's got respiratory therapy and nurses and the whole team on the plane and can get her home. This is the jet. It's going to run $120,000 to get her there. And we're ready to put her on the plane, and we're sitting in the mission plane, ready to go onto the fancy pants plane. And they have to do a nasal swab of my mother-in-law first to make sure she doesn't have COVID. And she has COVID. Okay, so what does that mean? They say, well, it means that she has to fly intubated. We can't have her breathing COVID out into a small plane. Like, all right, well, I really don't want my 78-year-old mother-in-law who has bacterial meningitis and COVID to be intubated. Because if you followed the pandemic bunch, when elderly are intubated with COVID, not many of them are ever extubated. The tube doesn't come out very often, not with a good outcome. They say, well, and so I'm going back and forth. I really don't want to do this, but I really want to get her to America. So how do we do this? I'm in the back of an airplane. We're about to go in their plane. They want me to take her to the government hospital to intubate her. I say, no, I've been there. There's no way. I would rather do it myself right here. I have all the supplies. I'm going to do it in the back of the plane, but this is a really terrible idea. We go back and forth. They swab me because I'm supposed to be going with her on the flight. I also have COVID. So now I have to stay away from everybody to not risk the rest of it. Because my father-in-law, I'd love to get him back to the States. And if he has COVID as well, that's going to really throw a wrench in things. They swab him. He miraculously has a negative test. So finally they come back and they say, we have another option. We can fly another jet from Canada. It's got a fancy isolation pod. We can put your mother inside of it. We zip it shut. She won't be breathing all of her COVID germs on us. We go back to America, and all is well. I say, great, send the plane. So they sent a second jet from Canada to Africa, bringing the pod. Meanwhile, I have to tell Danae, I'm taking that birthday present back. The next day, Danae is scheduled to have a hysterectomy. That's why she's back in America in the first place. So, oh yeah, your mom has meningitis. She's still kind of comatose. She also has COVID. Now I can't fly her back to America. And you should go have the peace of mind that all is well and go have surgery tomorrow. Things aren't going real well. The sun sets on our planes, and the planes aren't going anywhere. It's now 10 o'clock at night by the time all is wrapped up. I have my comatose mother-in-law on the tarmac of a hospital in Chad, Africa, with bacterial meningitis, now COVID apparently, nowhere to go. So we call a guest house, and we tell them we have an infectious patient, and we need a room where we can isolate her for I don't know how long until a plane can come that can take her out. And they say, yeah, okay. So we go over, we set up our table. I don't know how you can see the table, but there's IV bottles, there's central line kits, there's all the medical stuff we have because we took it just in case we might need it. We brought 4 days of supplies with us just in case. Mom is in that back room on a bed. We got that propped up. We brought in mud bricks from the garden and lifted up the bed and stuck that under the bed to get the head of her bed up and elevated. We kept going with all of the IV fluids. We kept going with all the antibiotics. We kept going with everything for a few days until the next plane could show up. There's a new plan, but now we have not just a patient that needs an ICU bed, but somebody that needs a COVID ICU bed. And I don't know if you paid attention, but we have a pandemic going on, or at least have some issues with our medical system being overwhelmed. And it's not just here, it was the same in Europe. We couldn't get a COVID ICU bed in France, anywhere in France. We couldn't get into the the American military hospital in Europe. Finally, we find a hospital bed in an Adventist hospital in Berlin. They're Adventist, we play the missionary card, they say, okay, we'll save a bed for you. So it keeps going on. Danae does have her surgery despite all that's going on, because the whole family tells her she needs to go have this surgery. She wakes up, she's fine, everything went well. Prayers and prayers and prayers and more prayers, and phone calls going nonstop. This is the pod that they sent to send her in. They get there with the pod and they decide to intubate her anyways, which is a real challenge for us. But we keep praying. We decide that it's all okay. They zip her into the pod, and this pod is what they get into the airplane. And in the dark of night, in the middle of the night, right after the plane shows up and she gets intubated and put into the plane, that's me and my two nurses, and the plane takes off. That was a tough moment. But she made it to Germany after a fuel stop in France, and she goes on a tour. They take her from her pod bubble out of the plane onto an ambulance, into the hospital, into the ICU, where she gets the CAT scan, she gets the lab work, she gets everything done. I'm talking to her, 3 ICU doctors who are taking care of her. They say she's good to go, she's fine, it's been 12 hours, whenever they're ready to go. It took about 2 days, but finally the plane came, collected her, and they take her on. She still hasn't woken up. Her sedative and her blood pressure medicine and everything else is at the lowest possible dose, and she's not waking up. And we're getting to be a little bit discouraged. She goes on the move. The plane goes to Iceland, then it goes to Newfoundland, then it goes to Ontario, then it goes to St. Louis, and then it arrives in Fayetteville, where Danae's sister, also a graduate of Ozark, has pulled 1,000 strings of the hospital so they can save a COVID ICU bed for her. She goes straight into the emergency department where Danita works, and eventually makes it to their ICU. She gets an MRI, which shows pus in her brain, which we kind of knew about, but it also shows this cyst back in here. There's no MRI in the country of Chad. We would have never found it where we are. The same evening, I think they found it, ENT went back, the ear, nose, and throat doctor went back and drained it. They drain it, and she starts to wake up. And there's prayers and prayers and more prayers going on. There's more and more prayers than I've been a part of. And then eventually, we're chatting with her on Zoom. Beth Snyder is the chaplain at Fayetteville, who was kind enough to go help us chat with her while she's in the ICU. Eventually, she's taken off of her COVID precautions, and Danae is able to go visit. She's able to go outside, and there was some memory issues. She thought that my 6-year-old daughter was actually Danita, who's currently not 6 years old. But eventually it starts to come back. There are some memory gaps, but the memory gaps start closing every day. There's some weakness, but eventually she can do some exercises now. She's home. And that's her on the left. We believe in miracles, don't we? Yeah. Do we? Do we act like we believe in miracles? No, we believe that we see them often. Working in a mission hospital, we feel like we see miracles very often. We also see times when we wait for miracles and they don't come. Am I right? Have you experienced that? We wait for miracles. Medical advances continue. Humanity still has a 100% mortality rate. If you're born, you die. Right? Unless you're Enoch or Elijah, you eventually die no matter what kind of miracles you pray for eternal life. It doesn't happen here. So we don't know when Mom will die, but we assume that unless Jesus comes before then, she will, and so will I, and so will you. But she has time left. She still has work to do. God still has a plan for her. And so we feel that God wrought this miracle. And we talked a little bit about money. We're going to start passing around the hat now to take off a collection. That's glad that you all came to Alumni Weekend so you could donate to this. Okay, so a little math. So the cost of the flight from Bere to the capital of the country, that mission plane that came in, it cost them to run the plane. They don't do it for free. It was about a $1,300 flight. I told you it was $120,000. So the total bill came to $121,284.33. Would you like that in 10s or 20s? We never asked anybody for money. But somebody got a hold of Danae's Venmo account and started spreading the word. Just started sharing it around, and people started donating money. I didn't check the account. I didn't know how much had come in. I didn't know what the final bill would be. I didn't know who would pay what. The General Conference had said they might kick in some money. The General Conference ended up kicking in $75,000. So we were only short $46,284.33. What came into Danae's Venmo You teach math? Personal finance, even better. From a bill that started as $122,000, I assume that's a rounding error somewhere. $10. Do you believe in miracles? We're left with a $10.83 bill. But I forgot one thing. I checked PayPal and it was $3,000 more. I made money off of my mother-in-law being sick. It'll go to a good cause. I hope that you believe in miracles. And when you're looking for that miracle, I hope you can remember Psalm 121. You guys know it, right? How does it go? Psalm 121, verses 1 and 2. So somebody say it loudly. Amen. Where does our help come from? Our help comes from the Lord. Thank you so much for coming to Alumni Weekend. I hope that you are blessed. I hope that you find miracles. When a bill comes out right within 0.01% of the bill, 0.01% of the bill, I hope you believe that miracles can still happen. I apologize for the misprint. I lift my eyes toward the mountains. Where will my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth.